to Ill-Equipped History, where two best friends talk about history. I'm your host for today, Morgan, joined by my lovely co-host, Emileigh. How are you doing?
Hey, I am good. I am so good. How are you?
Good. I'm good.
Good.
Very good.
How many times are we going to say good? A good amount?
Oh, man.
Anything new happening this week?
Nope, just, getting through, just making it. How about you?
Well, at the time of recording, in a couple days, I'll be going to Jeep Invasion.
Oh, fun.
Pigeon Forge. That's always a lot of fun. My kids call it Jeep Evasion. And
I love that.
My husband / father-in-law's Jeep, the World War II Jeep, is going to be in what they call the Winner's Circle. So It's going to be in the show. My dad's going to have a booth this year for his, company. He builds Jeeps. One of the Jeeps that he's worked on's gone to SEMA, so that's fun.
Is it the CJ?
It was Greg's Renegade. It's red.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Red Jeep.
It's like, who's Greg? I don't know.
And no, but he I think all the Jeeps are going to be in the show. Mom's Jeep is going to be in it this year. Nick's is, Dad's, all sorts that he's
sounds like
on,
a right Jeep invasion there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's thousands of people that come. And I just want y'all to know that I don't know why it took me so long, but I have decided I am going to do an episode on the history of Jeep, so be ready for that one soon.
All right.
I don't know why it took me so long to think of that. It's literally been my entire life. Jeep. So
your life is Jeep.
My life is Jeep. So anyway.
All right. Well, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
We've got some special things in the works for you guys. I'm really excited. We're still finalizing some of the minutia of it, but we've got something really neat planned.
Yeah.
Or something.
If all goes according to plan, we might get some bonus content.
Woo!
Woo! Bonus content.
Yeah. I'm doing like a shimmy.
We're
Can't
shimmying
see me,
again.
I'm shimmying. We're shimmying.
Shimmying.
All right. So my episode today, it was actually going to be something different. But I was having a really hard time finding really good sources. So I had to wait to buy some sources, or some a book. I had to buy a book, and it is going to be here in a couple of days, but it'd be too late to read this 400-page book in a day and all that. So I picked something that we had actually mentioned before, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. And then Kyle was telling me about this documentary on Netflix that I highly recommend you watch.
Yeah.
I'll mention it a little bit later.
Okay.
I'm sure, as you can tell, we're just gonna jump right into the skit, okay?
Yeah.
You'll know from the title what we're talking about. New Bern, North Carolina, 1893. Our scene opens in Bradham's Pharmacy. Customers are raving about the new fountain drink, Coca-Cola. Hey, this stuff is great. I feel alive. I feel like I can accomplish anything. This tastes so good. Wow, I feel like I could run a marathon and climb a mountain and go canoeing and swim across the ocean and solve the world's problems. I don't need to eat or sleep. And wow, my headache is gone. And I can climb trees and I can build a house and I can go down and walk on a road.
All of my customers are going crazy about this newfangled Coca-Cola. They must feel good, but it's not good for them. I bet I could create something that tastes just as good without the negative side effects. A little vanilla here, some sugar, Can't forget the cola flavor. And done! My new digestive aid. Hey everyone, come have a taste.
Wow, this is tasty. My tummy rumbles are gone. And this is so sweet and nice. You're a genius, Bradham.
Oh, I'm just glad you like it.
You should market this. Call it Brad's Drink. It'll catch on everywhere.
I'm not sure that's the best name for it, but it'll do for now. I'm glad everybody likes my all-natural digestion aid. Do you see me doing like little...
Your little head movements there? For emphasis?
Yeah.
I think the spirit of Caleb Bradham inhabited you as you were going through that skit.
He was doing little stirry motions. And
I mean, he was tinkering around with it. He was mixing it up.
He was.
All right. So today we are talking about the history and the hijinks of the Pepsi Corporation. We're going to be talking about the drink and the company itself. So this is kind of a wild ride.
Okay. Yeah. Just you talking about your topic the other day was like a wild ride. So I am very excited about this.
Well, and I think Kyle told me, he was like, you know what? You've done some really like thick episodes.
Yeah.
You need to do something that's a little lighter. And I was like, okay. And then again, like my first topic I wanted to do fell through. And it was funny because we would have both been covering famous Tennessee natives.
Yeah.
I'll cover this person in a while. But this one, I was like, I've already been talking about doing it at some point. I'm just going to do it now. So here I am talking about Pepsi. Well. So, to talk about the origins of Pepsi, I also have to talk about Coca-Cola because they really don't exist one without the other. I'm not going to go too deep into detail about Coca-Cola because obviously it deserves its own episode, but they're so intertwined. It's really hard to talk about how Pepsi was invented and how it became a company without also talking about Coca-Cola.
Right.
At least in the beginning. As time goes on, they start, having separate identities and all that. But I mean, still, like, and I'll talk about it, but again, like they both kind of feed off each other. So we're going to enter in at the end of the Civil War in the United States. The South has rejoined the Union, but there's a lot of damage in the South. The war was very, very hard down here, and a lot of people were desperate and in pain. Mm-hmm. In 1892, Coca-Cola was invented in Atlanta, Georgia, and people loved the stuff, mostly because it had caffeine and cocaine in it. So it made people feel real good.
I bet it did.
One of the sources that I was reading, it's actually about pharmacies in this area, or in this era. So a lot of, and I'll go into it in a little bit, but pharmacists would come up with their own concoctions, and that's what Coca-Cola was originally. It was a type of medicine to help headaches. And it did, because caffeine and cocaine would make the headaches go away. And then when the headaches came back, they had to go and buy more Coca-Cola. And it was funny because John Pemberton, who invented Coca-Cola, was like, oh, it's not addictive. Lies. It was very addictive.
Of course it was very addictive. I remember drinking a Coke every day in high school because about 2 o'clock, I would get a headache. Every day.
And that's without the cocaine in it.
That's without the Coke. I just had regular Coke, no Coke.
Right. No Coke. Even though it was super widespread, like, there was some understanding that cocaine was not the best for you. Like, people understood it was addictive.
Right.
Sometimes measures were taken to not utilize that. So now we're going to jump to talking about a man named Caleb Bradham. So Caleb Bradham was born in, I think it's pronounced Bradham. It's spelled Bradham, but I assume it's Bradham. He was born in 1867 in North Carolina. I couldn't really find a lot about his childhood. I found there's an exhibit about him at the North Carolina History Museum that I found online. It has a little biography of him. He, at some point, went to the University of Maryland because he wanted to be a doctor. But his father ended up declaring bankruptcy, so Caleb had to move back home and be with his family and help out. When he moved back home, he taught at a New Bern academy, and then eventually he was able to go back to school. So he returned to the University of Maryland, but instead of finishing his medical doctorate degree, he's ended up becoming a pharmacist.
Okay.
And I wonder, it doesn't really say, but I wonder if it's because, like, there wasn't so much school, he could get into the field faster. You know, being a doctor takes a lot of school. And being a pharmacist does too, but I don't think it's near as much schooling as a
I don't
doctor.
think it is either, yeah.
So he ended up, after he graduated, he opened his own pharmacy in New Bern, North Carolina. So I'm going to take another little sidetrack here, because this I found was very interesting. So around this time, like a little before and after, soda fountains were very popular in pharmacies. They were everywhere. So why were soda fountains such a staple in pharmacies at the time? Starting in the 1850s, fountain drinks were like a tonic that were formed by pharmacists. So they would create like a syrup, and then they would mix it with carbonated water, which is also considered to have healing properties. And then they would sell the fountain drinks as like a form of medicine.
Oh.
Yeah, and so pharmacists would make their own little concoctions. Sometimes they had caffeine, sometimes they had cocaine, sometimes they had some other ingredients, but they helped some kind of symptom.
Right.
Typically, they weren't just for, this is tasty. Yeah, I'd already said everything else that I wrote down.
Did you know that up until probably 10 years ago, there was a pharmacy downtown Athens that still was like, it had the whole vibe and everything, and had like Coke machines and stuff?
I remember the pharmacy, and
Yeah.
I remember the counter
Yeah.
that the soda fountain was behind.
They had all that stuff. They sold like ice cream and everything. And you can still pick up your
really cool.
prescriptions there. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. And there's more information about soda fountains in pharmacies.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take too much time away from
That's fair.
the Pepsi story.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're curious, I'd highly recommend, I think there is a website called like pharmacyinfo.com or something that talked about it. It was neat. And also I found out carbonated water was invented on accident in 1767. So
How?
it's been around for a long time. I saw it and I was like, that's neat. And I didn't look up into how it was invented. Because again, I was trying to be...
That's fair.
You should look it up though. But I did see it was invented on accident.
I love how my favorite things are always invented on accident. Wheat beer. Not wheat beer. Lagers.
Yeah.
Lagers.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And carbonated water.
Yeah. Love carbon. I'm drinking a seltzer right now. So, yay, carbonated water.
Yay.
We're going to go back on track here. So, now we'll talk about Bradham's inventions. So, like we mentioned, in the 1890s, Coca-Cola was very popular because...
Cocaine.
Yeah. The cocaine and the caffeine. And Caleb wanted to create a drink that people still enjoyed, that had health benefits, that didn't have the addictive properties of Coca-Cola. So... 1893, which is 8 years after the invention of Coca-Cola, Caleb invented what was initially known as Brad's drink. And he didn't name it that. Locals that enjoyed it named it that. It included caramel, sugar, vanilla, fruit juice, natural oils. And also I found out, so there is something called a cola nut. And that is what the cola flavor is. It comes from this little nut.
Oh.
So, and actually the cola nut contains caffeine. So I'm not entirely sure if his original recipe had the cola nut in it or not, because sources I saw said that his drink was caffeine free. So I don't know if he was able to imitate the cola flavors through some other methods without the caffeine.
Maybe.
Not sure. But people loved it. People thought it was tasty. Apparently did help relieve some digestion issues. And eventually, in 1898, so 5 years after he invented it, he renamed it to Pepsi Cola. And that's most likely related to the Greek word pepsis, which means digestion.
Oh.
Yeah, so now we have Pepsi Cola. In 1903, Pepsi Cola took off. In its first year, it sold 8,000 gallons of syrup. The next year, it sold 20,000 gallons of syrup.
Wait, we went from 8 to 20,000?
In 1 year.
Holy shit.
And it's just the syrup. It's not even the entire beverage. It's just the syrup.
Oh my God.
So it got very popular. It got so popular that the people of New Bern wanted him to run for mayor. So very soon after he started selling the syrup, they started bottling.
Yeah.
So instead of having to go to a pharmacy to get the syrup and the carbonated water added, you could buy the entire drink in a bottle. The Pepsi Cola company had one of the first trademarks with the U.S. Patent Office, and they were able to sell it as a pure food drink after the Food and Drug Act passed in 1906, which meant that you couldn't have any harmful chemicals in your food, and they didn't have any, so they didn't have to change their recipe.
Ah.
So that was,
That's nice.
By 1910, there were over 300 bottlers selling Pepsi Cola, and it was one of the first companies to ship products using automobiles. And also celebrities were endorsing Pepsi Cola. They had some racers, some actors and actresses endorsing it on like the radios and with print ads. Yeah.
Now, was Coca-Cola doing that at the same time as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So Coca-Cola, and that's actually my next line. So despite their success, they were not near as big as Coca-Cola was. Coca-Cola was an advertising juggernaut.
Right.
They, like, from the beginning, they were using, like, wholesomeness and tradition and nostalgia to sell their product. Mm. And even today, it's one of the most famous and well-known brands in the world.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times when you get there first, you end up being the brand that people stick with. It's like Yeti, they got really big, and then all these other brands started doing something pretty similar, but I still see Yeti as being one of the leaders because I feel like they got there first. Kind of a thing.
And it does come up later, but people will really stick to products that they know.
Yeah. Because
they're used to them. And I will talk about it. It's much, much later. It happens in like the 80s. But it's a very controversial thing that happened. In Pepsi's favor. Not for Coke's favor. Now we're heading into World War I. Mm-hmm. So Caleb is enjoying a lot of success with the Pepsi Cola company. They reached a height of prosperity in 1915. In 1917, the U.S. joined World War I, and sugar was rationed. So the price of sugar increased to the point where Pepsi can't afford to make the syrup anymore. It went from like 5 cents a pound to almost 30 cents a pound.
Good Lord.
And so Caleb was like trying to like hoard sugar, but then the sugar market crashed. So Caleb and the Pepsi Cola company declared bankruptcy in 1920. Then the sugar market crashed, and the price of sugar went down to 3 cents a pound. So it's cheaper now than it was before they entered the war.
Oh, no.
So now he had all this sugar, and he couldn't sell it because he couldn't use all the sugar. So he declared bankruptcy. And so I think he sold the company, so he was no longer in charge of Pepsi Cola. So Caleb returned to his pharmacy, and he had a good life after this. He ran a successful pharmacy. He actually developed and maintained a scholarship to the University of North Carolina School of Pharmacy up until 1930. He was active in his community with the local government. He was a county commissioner at one point. He was involved with a lot of charity events. He was high-ranking in the Shriner Guild. I don't know if that's how you say it, but with the Shriners. He co-founded the North Carolina Naval Militia, and he had the rank of captain.
Wow.
And then he eventually passed away in 1934 after an illness, and he was 66 or 67 when he passed away. So
Yeah.
he had a nice, good life. He had a wife. He had some kids. You know, he lived his life.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're moving onward. After Pepsi Cola first declared bankruptcy, the trademark was bought by Royce McGargle. I think that's how you say it.
Okay.
McGargle. He wasn't really able to do anything with the Pepsi trademark either, and Pepsi Cola declared bankruptcy again.
Oh, God.
In like 10 years. So in 1931, the trademark was bought by Loft Candy Company, and they also really struggled. And it's during this time that the recipe was changed from the original concoction developed by Caleb Bradham. So they also couldn't compete with Coca-Cola's advertising. At the time, it started becoming like what we kind of know it as today. It was just very, very effective. So between 1922 and 1933, Pepsi Cola tried to sell to Coca-Cola 3 times. And each time Coke refused, which is really ironic because now Pepsi and Coca-Cola are the 2 biggest soda giants.
Yeah.
They're the really only big names in soda.
That is...
And Pepsi tried to sell to them 3 times.
Coke could own them. But they were like, no, we don't want it.
Because it wasn't worth anything.
Yeah.
There was no point in it at the time. So it's just kind of ironic.
That's crazy.
That's ironic. Anyway, so now the Great Depression hits in 1929. So everyone is having a bad time.
Yeah.
Pepsi Cola is trying to find ways to save some costs. So what they start doing is they start using recycled beer bottles. They were sterilized. This actually worked in Pepsi's favor. So at the time, soft drinks were traditionally served in 6-ounce bottles for a nickel. Mm-hmm. But because Pepsi Cola was using recycled beer bottles, they were able to sell Pepsi in 12-ounce bottles for a nickel. Oh. So you're getting double for the same price. And this really worked for them. But at the same time, they kind of got this reputation for, and I apologize, this is the attitude that was had about Pepsi at the time. It was a drink of poors and blacks. Aww. Because it was so affordable, which actually Pepsi later embraces. But that was kind of the reputation it had, is, oh, only poor people drink Pepsi. And actually, one of the documentaries I watched said that women would pour Pepsi into Coke bottles and then serve the Pepsi into Coke bottles to guests and hope that they couldn't taste the difference because they didn't want them to know that it was Pepsi.
You know,
so
that actually, I had, when I was in culinary school, I had a professor, a chef, who said that at dinner parties, she goes like to her basement where she like keeps all of her wine, and she pours box wine into decanters and serves the box wine, and then she watches all of the wine snobs like twirling it around, and they're like, oh, what a beautiful vintage.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's Franzia.
Listen, I love Franzia.
I do too.
I go to Aldi and I get the $11 box of boxed wine.
Hey, that Wink and Owl is
it's $11.
Yep.
Or I get the $3 bottles. I am the cheap date.
Yeah. Well, now that I've had 2 kids, I'm a cheap drunk now. It doesn't take me a while. Okay, funny. Anyway, I'll quit derailing you, I promise.
All right, so, no, it's okay. So even though Pepsi, they were starting to find success, they were still less than 10% of the total market share. Like, Coca-Cola was dominating 90% of the soft drink market. Yeah. And this is when Coca-Cola really started integrating itself into Americana.
Yeah.
It was like Norman Rockwell was creating ads for Coca-Cola, and this is when they came up with the Santa that we all know of, like and idealized now, the the fat Santa with the red and white suit, that's a Coca-Cola advertisement.
Yeah. Yeah.
That has now integrated itself into the American collective consciousness of Santa. Like, it's crazy. So Pepsi Cola was really trying to start ramping up their own advertising, but they didn't have the cash that Coca-Cola did, so they had to be very creative.
Right.
So one thing that they did was they really utilized jingles. So what they would do is that they would have a 5-second jingle instead of the traditional 60-second commercial, and they would get the radio stations to play them more often. And it was a lot less expensive because you're only paying for a 5-second jingle versus a minute-long commercial. Yeah. And they would play more often. And like people to this day, like that were around that time can still sing it's like nickel, nickel, nickel for Pepsi or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I thought this was kind of funny. So in 1938, Coca-Cola sued Pepsi Cola over the use of cola, citing copyright infringement.
Bud. What?
So Pepsi Cola said that Coca-Cola was trying to form a monopoly and all that, but they did eventually drop the cola from their name. So now they're just Pepsi.
Okay.
Now we're getting into World War II. And this is just going to be very brief. Coca-Cola did a bunch during World War II I'm not going to get into. But during World War II, Pepsi changed their colors to red, white, and blue because patriotism. Okay. I think it was just like red and white before. They also set up free recording booths for soldiers to send messages home to their families. Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet.
They're like, we're advertising. I know. And then in the 1940s, Pepsi began heavily advertising to the African American community. They realized they had an untapped market, and they actually and this market was untapped by other companies. So they actually hired an all-black advertising team to advertise to this community. And I included a picture of an ad from this time
that's amazing.
Was targeted towards the African American community. So they're like, I mean, this is more money for us, right? Yeah. And we want them to buy our drinks, so we're going to directly target this community.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get into the beginning of the Cola Wars, which are still going on to this day. So in 1950, a man named Alfred Steele became president and CEO of Pepsi. He was previously the president of Coca-Cola, which is kind of funny. So he married, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, Joan Crawford.
Never in my life.
Well, he married her. And so Joan Crawford began endorsing Pepsi. And this is a very good move because the Pepsi sales increased by $10 million in 10 years.
Because of Joan Crawford?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And probably, I mean, they were still trying to use whatever celebrity endorsements too, but I think Joan Crawford had a really big piece of it. And actually,
well, of course
when Alfred Steele died, Joan took his position on the board of directors for Pepsi until 1973. So I just thought that was neat.
That is incredible.
A man named Don Kendall then became the new leadership at Pepsi, and he actually worked his way up from being a syrup salesman.
That's a lot of working up, yeah.
So he was at like the bottom of the barrel to president of the company. That's pretty impressive.
Wow. That is super impressive.
And it's around this time that Pepsi realized that their more traditional advertising was not super effective. So they, besides like their niche advertising to the Black community, most of their ads were conveying like old rich white people. And it just was not connecting to who they wanted for their consumer base. So now we're going to get into I titled it the Cold Cola War. So this is during the Cold War. It's also a cola war. So in the 1950s, the world was in the throes of the Cold War. The USSR declared Coca-Cola was not allowed as it was an evil machination of capitalism. So the USSR did not allow Coca-Cola. And Pepsi was like, we're not Coca-Cola. We could come in.
We're Pepsi.
Or Pepsi. So in 1959, the American National Exhibition in Moscow was held, and Pepsi was the very first American product sold in the USSR. And in my list of pictures, there's actually a picture of Nikita Khrushchev drinking some Pepsi. He was a leader of the USSR during this time.
Wait, let me see where.
It's a black and white image.
I see it. Yeah.
Joan Crawford and Nikita Khrushchev.
Look at them.
It was at this time, it was illegal to trade the Russian ruble outside of the USSR.
Right.
But they had to have some kind of agreement. So what they did instead is that the Soviet Union traded Stoli vodka for Pepsi. And then Pepsi turned around and sold the vodka in the United States. I just think that's really funny. They're like, here's some vodka. And they're like, okay. But by 1979, this was no longer profitable. And so they were trying to figure out what they could do instead. So
right.
And you told me about this, actually. There is a very common misperception that Pepsi had the 6th largest military in the world. It's not true, unfortunately. So they were actually talking about potentially trading decommissioned like warships and tanks and stuff like that for Pepsi. But Pepsi was like, what are we going to do with decommissioned weapons? Like, what are we going to do with them? And so they actually were, they came up with a deal where the Soviet Union would build freight ships for Pepsi. And that would be their trade. But that actually never went through because the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991 before they could go through with this agreement.
That makes sense. Well, I'm very disappointed that that's not actually true.
I know. I mean, a lot of people did. The New York Times reported on it at the time.
Oh.
So I think that's kind of
where
caused
the
this
misconception
to
came
spread.
from. Yeah.
Because I saw a lot in my research, but when I like dug deeper, it was like it wasn't really true. They were talking about it, but it never actually happened, unfortunately. All right, so now we're going into the proper cola wars. So in the 1960s, Pepsi rebranded again, and they wanted to appeal to the baby boomer generation. They were emulating peace and love and hippies, and they coined the term the Pepsi generation. They're like, you're a part of the Pepsi generation. We're so cool and free, and we drink Pepsi. While, like, the opposite part of that was Coca-Cola that was still using, like, nostalgia and family and more, like, traditional values, where Pepsi was like, no, we're cool and free. So, and that actually kind of that's kind of how the two brands continue to identify.
Yeah.
In 1964, Pepsi released Diet Pepsi, which was the first successful diet drink. Coke actually wouldn't even have a diet drink for almost a decade.
Oh my God.
I know. It's so weird to think that Diet Pepsi came before Diet Coke.
Yeah.
In 1965, Pepsi merged with Frito-Lay, the snack company, and they became a conglomerate called PepsiCo. In 5 years, they went from $500 million in profits to over $1 billion in profits.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
In
Which,
5
I mean, it could be
years?
because it went from one company to two, but...
Yeah. But still.
Yeah. And, I mean, it makes sense. Like, you get a sweet drink with salty chips and match made in heaven. So, Pepsi and Coke were trying to battle out. They wanted to take over, like, all the stuff with the Soviet Union was going on. The Chinese market opened. And Pepsi and Coca-Cola were like, we want the Chinese market. And Coke eventually won that. But it's so funny because during the Cold War, Pepsi and Coca-Cola had spies and they were spying on each other.
During the Cold War?
It's so crazy.
Like
During
they didn't have anything else to worry about? It's not going to matter if everyone's blown up. Oh my God.
So in the 80s, Pepsi began really hitting hard on using celebrities to endorse their product.
Yeah.
And again, like, Coke was traditional, wholesome Americana, and Pepsi was young and fresh and cool. So, like Michael Jackson, Madonna, Gwen Stefani, the Spice Girls, Cindy Crawford became big names and endorsers for Pepsi. Actually, well,
I was about to say, I do remember seeing, my mom showed me the commercial with Michael Jackson in it. And it's like a big production. It is like a whole thing. Yeah.
In one of the documentaries I watched, it had Cindy Crawford in it. And she said people still dress up as her from her Pepsi ad to this day. Oh my God. And will like send her pictures of them dressed up as her. And it's very like, I mean, it is very iconic, but I mean, it's Cindy Crawford. She's in like a white tank top tucked into blue jeans, and she's just getting a Pepsi out of a vending machine. But she was like one of the first supermodels, so she's like,
I'm literally just Googling gorgeous. It right now. Oh my God.
It's very iconic. Yeah. And actually, I have a kind of a picture of Michael Jackson and Cindy Crawford. But yeah, so that was really big. And actually, I rewatched the ad with Beyonce, Britney Spears, and Pink. They are dressed up as gladiators and are singing "We Will Rock You" in the Gladiator Stadium. That was a really big Pepsi ad too. That ingrained itself into my childhood. And this is kind of bringing it back to what we were talking about earlier, where people like what they like. They like what they're used to. So Pepsi kept falling behind in sales than Coke. And they're like, okay, what do we do? So they created the Pepsi. In 1985, they created the Pepsi Challenge. And this is a blind taste test between Pepsi and Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Pepsi slightly won. Not by a whole lot, but a little over 50% people preferred Pepsi to Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola was pissed. And they're like, well, damn it. They did it in their own headquarters. And the same results. Pepsi outbeat Coke in their own headquarters. So Coke is freaking out. They're like, well, we got to fix this. So then they came out with New Coke as a new and improved recipe. This was a disaster. Yeah. People hate it. They're like, how dare you change Coca-Cola?
I remember my mom talking about New Coke once, and she was like, it was so bad. Like, it was just bad.
It's really funny because New Coke performed better in blind taste tests than the original Coke recipe, but people were so pissed off about the new Coke, God. They stopped buying it. And actually, in one of the documentaries I watched, there's like a Pepsi like ad or something, and they have a banner that says Pepsi welcomes New Coke. Because people stopped buying Coke and started buying Pepsi. So they're like, this is great for us.
I love Pepsi that is.
Oh, I know. It's so petty. It's so funny. So it ended up biting Pepsi in the ass, though, because like Coke was like, okay, we'll go back to our original recipe. So they released Coca-Cola Classic. Yeah. And their sales skyrocketed. They've never done better.
Oh, man.
So Coke went right back to being on top. And a lot of people actually think this was done on purpose to increase sales.
Yeah.
All the documentaries I watched really didn't seem to think so. It was a blunder done by Coke because they were panicking about the Pepsi challenge. And then they're like, well, we messed up, so we got to go back to our original recipe. And actually, in one of the documentaries I watched, I'll talk about in a second, they had the people in the documentary do the Pepsi challenge. Like they handed up cups, and they were like, which one do you pick? And Coke won 6-5. Which is funny. God. So, I mean, like, they don't taste the same, but they are so similar, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. And as Billy Joel stated, rock and roller cola wars, I can't take it anymore. Like, and the cola wars are still going on. They have not gone away. You know, Pepsi and cola or Coke are still duking it out. Okay. So now we're going to get into some real shenanigans. This does turn into a sad story, this one part. People end up dying in this situation. So in 1992, Pepsi was trying to increase their sales. So they had like a lottery game. It had gone in other places in the world, but they brought it to the Philippines. And it's called Number Fever, was the name of this game. And there were codes printed on the inside of bottle caps. If a number was drawn, you could turn it in for a cash prize. The grand prize was 1 million pesos, which was worth about 40 to 50,000 US dollars. And this was 10 times the annual salary of the average Filipino at the time.
Wow.
So this was a life-changing amount of money. And the campaign worked. Wait, I wrote over 600 times the annual salary. Damn. Okay. So over half of the population of the Philippines were participating in this contest.
Right.
I mean, people were buying Pepsi over bread, over food. They were digging through the trash to find discarded Pepsi caps. I mean, people were desperate. And actually, one of the documentaries, there were people that participated in this game that were still around, and they provided some interviews. And some people were saying, I was drinking Pepsi 3 times a day, 5 times a day, just to try to get some cash. And so there were a lot of like the small cash prizes, but again, there was a grand prize. So the campaign was so successful. Pepsi increased their profits by so much. In the Philippines, they extended the contest by 5 more weeks. And this is where the disaster happens. So the initial plan was that there would be 2 bottle caps printed with the grand prize code 349. But the computer system in charge of randomizing the numbers was not built to handle this 5-week extension. So one evening, the grand prize code was announced 349. But there were not 2. There were over 600,000 bottle caps printed with this grand prize winning code.
Oh, God.
All the winners, thousands of people showed up at the site where you go and redeem your bottle cap, demanding the grand prize. Like, thousands of people wanted the 1 million pesos. And Pepsi was like, we can't do this. If they did, it would cost over 30 billion US dollars.
Oh, my.
And that would have bankrupted the company. So they're like, no. So instead, Pepsi offered all the winners, they're like, you can have 500 pesos, which was worth about 20 US dollars. A lot of people took the deal because they're like, hey, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were very, very angry, and riots happened. Full on riots. People were attacking trucks. People were attacking the manufacturing, like the bottling plants. People were throwing Molotov cocktails and grenades, and actually 5 people were killed. 3 Pepsi employees were killed, and then a teacher and a child were killed from a grenade blast. Like, it was it ended absolutely horribly. And so a group called the 349 Coalition in the Philippines eventually sued Pepsi in New York. And there was a years-long legal battle. And in the end, Pepsi only ended up paying about 150,000 pesos, which is less than 3,000 US dollars today.
And also
so it's probably
not
worth
even
less.
Worth one of those winning bottle caps. That's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, it did not go well. So now this one is not as sad, but it's also a very big controversy. So there's this documentary on Netflix called Pepsi, Where's My Jet? And it's about this event. So not long, only like a few years after the Number Fever debacle.
Yeah.
In the United States, and I think also in Canada, Pepsi released a promotion called Pepsi Stuff. Buy Pepsi, get stuff. So you could buy Pepsi products, you would get points, and then you could redeem those points to get gear, like t-shirts and soccer balls and bags and, just neat
stuff.
Pepsi merchandise. So their initial commercial aired in 1996. And in this commercial, and I have a screen grab from this commercial, they said that you could win a Harrier jet for 7 million Pepsi points. And this is a military jet. A college student named John Leonard was like, cool, I want a jet. So he, was trying to figure out how much it'd be worth. So he found that a Harrier jet was worth about 30 to 32 million dollars.
Yeah.
He had this big scheme where he had a wealthy friend that he relied on, and he was like, hey, like, if we could buy enough Pepsi, we could store it in warehouses, we could hire people to buy the Pepsi and take the points off. This whole thing will cost like $4.3 million. And his friend was like, nah, that's a lot of money. Right. But then later he found out that you could outright buy the points. It was like 10 cents a point. So you could buy 7 million points for $700,000. So he got the money, he mailed the check to Pepsi, and they're like, LOL, no, here's 2 free coupons for 6 packs of Pepsi. And he was like, no.
Where's my jet?
Where's my jet? Pepsi, where's my jet? So there was a lot of shenanigans that happened. So Pepsi ended up suing John Leonard, who's the kid who started all this.
For something
and
they promised? That's ridiculous.
Right. There was no disclaimer on this ad. And the reason why, like, I'll get to in a second. It's so ridiculous. So Pepsi originally sued John Leonard, and then they were like, okay, we'll settle with you. We'll give you $1 million if you forget this whole thing. And he was like, no, I want the jet.
Yeah.
And they're like, you stupid kid. And again, like, legal battles for years at this point was going on. And eventually it went before a federal judge. And she was like, no reasonable person would think that this was an actual offer. And so the case is dismissed, and John Leonard didn't get anything.
Damn.
So one of the people, he's a creative director for, like, Pepsi ads.
Yeah.
He was like a contractor or something. He wrote the ad. And he originally had it listed for 700 million points. Not just 7 million, 700 million. Because he was like, everyone will know it's a joke. Right. It's unrealistic. So he was showing the ad to, like, the first draft of the ad to some Pepsi executives. And one of the higher-ups was like, that's hard to read. Can we, like, shorten it? Because I can't read it. It's too many numbers. So then they shortened it to 7 million. He was like, that's better. I can read it. And again, they didn't have a disclaimer. And it wasn't until John Leonard, like, went to redeem the points that they changed it back to 700 million a few months after the original ad aired. And then after that, they added a just kidding disclaimer at the bottom. But that was all after he tried to redeem all the points.
Y'all, so. I wish you could see my face right now. This is so...
She's flabbergasted. So.
How can a company be so historically mismanaged on so many occasions and still be this big? What is happening?
It is actually the biggest worldwide company.
No shit.
Today. Yeah.
It's bigger than...
Because it owns so many other brands.
Oh.
So Coca-Cola sells more soft drinks. It is more successful in the soft drinks. PepsiCo owns so many different brands. It's such a huge conglomerate that it earns more money a year. But it's also, like, it's operating under different labels and stuff. Right. But yeah, so I wrote here, I highly recommend watching the documentary. It's like 4 episodes on Netflix. It's really funny. It's very lighthearted. A lot of the people are very funny. It goes into all the different characters involved. But I wrote here, John didn't get anything except for the friends he made along the way. I mean, he seems in pretty good spirits about it. Like, he's like, I didn't lose anything. I just didn't get my jet and I didn't get any money. But, I mean, he wasn't hurt. He wasn't destitute, so.
Yeah.
So now I'm just going to talk about the conglomerate of PepsiCo, which I just kind of mentioned already. And I wrote here, it actually outperforms Coca-Cola in total sales, though Coca-Cola sells more drinks than Pepsi. It's made up of more than 23 different brands. There's this video I watch, and it just goes over some of the different brands under the PepsiCo label. So they have Mug Root Beer, Aquafina, Tropicana, which is the biggest juice company.
Yeah.
It outperforms Minute Maid and some other ones. They own Naked Juice and Rockstar energy drinks. Oh. They own Frito-Lay, Cheetos, and Doritos. Quaker Oats, which is the biggest breakfast brand.
Wow.
Captain Crunch. Gatorade.
Oh
they own Gatorade, which is the biggest sports drink brand. In the 70s and 80s, they bought Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC. So that's why you see all those 3 restaurants are almost always like paired together if it's 2 in one restaurant.
And they always have Pepsi. I always wondered why they had Pepsi.
Because Pepsi owns them. And it kind of backfired because Pepsi owned these restaurants. Their competitors did not want to sell Pepsi products because they wanted to differentiate themselves.
Right.
So, so eventually Pepsi created like their own, like, I think they're still owned by Pepsi, or they were up until like 2 years ago, but they're under like a different name.
Right.
Wasn't outright PepsiCo, it was under a different name. They also at one point owned North American Moving Services and Wilson Sporting Goods.
Why?
I don't think either of those lasted very long, but PepsiCo owned them at one point.
But why?
Because I think Wilson was maybe like, oh, we want to have like sport partnerships. But then they're like, oh, no. So anyway, so now in today's time, in 2008, PepsiCo is the largest food and drink manufacturer in Russia, which is probably carry over from them being almost exclusive in the Cold War. In 2022, they did stop manufacturing there because of the war with Ukraine.
Yeah.
Pepsi, it's not all bad. You know, they've been trying to get more into the health food market, especially as people become more health conscious. They're trying to reduce their environmental impact. They're reducing the amount of plastic in their bottles. They actually made a completely plant-based PET bottle.
Okay.
Which was really neat. They're working on, like, if they're using a water source and they use more of it than they should, they'll replenish the water source.
Oh, good.
That was a really big thing in India. They use, like, during a drought, they use a ton of water. So they actually exceeded the amount of water that, like, they replenished more than they had used, which was really good.
Good.
It's not the end of their flack, though.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be all bad, but I think this was in 2013. They also own Mountain Dew. There was a very racist Mountain Dew commercial that was aired.
Oh, no.
It's funny because Tyler, the creator, directed it, but it's considered one of the most racist commercials ever made. It's actually a follow-up to a previous ad where there was this goat that really wanted Mountain Dew, and it beat up a waitress at a restaurant because it wanted Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
And in the follow-up ad, which is the racist ad, it has a waitress, and she's got a neck brace and crutches, and her face is all beat up and bloody, and she has to pick the goat out of a lineup, and the rest of the lineup is filled with black men. So, yeah. 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 Yeah, they pulled that ad pretty quick.
Good.
Actually, I couldn't even find the ad. Yeah, for real. I couldn't find the ad itself. I just found, like, news outlets talking about the ad, which was a good thing.
Who let that by? Who looked at that and was like, this is fine?
This is fine. I don't know. I have no idea. And then they caught flack again a few years ago. I don't know if you remember this ad, but it's this Kendall Jenner ad.
Yeah.
Where there's this, like, protest going on and everyone's like, love each other and peace.
Yeah.
And she leaves, like, a modeling gig, and then she hands up Pepsi to a police officer and everything is fine. But this is not against Kendall Jenner. She's just an actress in this commercial. It's not against her at all. But this was done during a height of Black Lives Matter protests. And it was considered very insensitive and tone deaf. Yeah. Even Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter tweeted about it. And was like, this is not good. it was seen as exploiting the Black Lives Matter movement. And one thing that I watched a couple like news videos about it, and one thing that kept getting brought up was that it looked like it was directly referencing this moment where, and I included this picture in the notes. There's a woman named Aisha Evans, and she's being detained by riot police. And I think this was in Baton Rouge during some Black Lives Matter protests. It's a very, very powerful image. But that one image is very often directly compared to the Kendall Jenner ad. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Also, this is just very interesting to me. I saw one thing that said that Kendall Jenner was the first supermodel to star in a Pepsi ad since Cindy Crawford in 1992.
Wonder why?
I don't know, because I thought I saw some with like Tyra Banks and stuff, but I don't know. It was just one source I saw. It may not be correctly, or if it was like a solo ad. But anyway, so the end. I mean, PepsiCo is still around today, still making soft drinks. They, are still doing their thing with Mountain Dew and energy drinks.
Maybe they should get a third party to organize their, not advertisement, but the contest they have. Maybe they should.
Yeah. Well, I think they definitely know now to have disclaimers on things that are meant to be jokes.
Yeah.
If it's not a serious offer, either don't include it or say it's a joke. Again, watch that documentary. It's very interesting. Again, it's Pepsi, Where's My Jet? It's on Netflix. I also watched this one documentary called Pepsi versus Cola, the marketing battle of the century. That goes more into the actual cola wars themselves. Why Pepsi went bankrupt was a video I watched on YouTube. Also, Pepsi Bigger Than You Know, that goes into the different brands under Pepsi and in some news articles.
Can I tell you something that makes me sound super dumb? Earlier, when you said the Billy Joel quote.
Yeah.
And it's rock and roll and cola wars.
Yeah.
I've been singing my entire fucking life rock and roller cola wars. And I had no idea what the roller cola wars were.
What's a roller cola?
What's a rock and roller cola?
That's so funny. I can't say anything though because I was singing Haben back up until like 2 years ago.
Oh, on the Fancy?
Yeah.
Mama died in a Haben back.
What's a Haben back? It's I Ain't Been Back for those who haven't heard the song. For years, like 2 decades, I've been singing it that way. So I can't say anything. I can't make fun of you for that.
I just needed to tell you that. Also, I didn't realize that in the Hootie and the Blowfish song where he goes, and the dolphins made me cry. I didn't know he was talking about a football team. I thought he was talking about like
actual dolphins.
It's like, why did a dolphin make you cry?
What did it do to you?
And I didn't realize it until a couple of years ago when Post Malone covered it, but he said the Cowboys instead, and I was like, I had like a mini out-of-body experience. And I was like, oh no, it's a football team.
That's really funny.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm dumb sometimes, y'all.
I am too. It's all right. We all have our dumb moments. But yeah.
Well, this was a really good one. It is a lot more wild than I thought it was going to be.
I know.
Even if I am disappointed that they didn't have a military.
I know. I was very sad to learn that. That was what I was most looking forward to researching. And it was like, it didn't actually happen. But I remember you telling me about the army thing.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks after that, I came across a post about the number fever incident in the Philippines. And I was like, holy shit. we should cover Pepsi at some point. And then I found out about the jet thing from Kyle, like, last week. And he was like, there's this documentary you gotta watch. It's about this guy who wanted to win a jet and Pepsi wouldn't let him. And I was like, okay. All right. Well, all these things are falling into place. So, yeah, I know more about Pepsi and Coke than probably a lot of people.
Well, I'll know what
and again,
resource
Coke deserves its own episode.
You know what's really always been funny to me is my mom, for y'all that don't know, is from Kentucky. And I promise you that it is so weird that I grew up here saying Coke and we drink Coke products. Like Pepsi is not more, Coke is more popular here where we live.
Right.
The moment we cross over into Kentucky, my mom is calling it Pop. When home, she calls it Coke, and we're drinking Pepsi. Like, my Kentucky family really does not buy Coke. They buy Pepsi, and they call it Pop. But then we drink Coke, and we call it Coke. Everything's a Coke. Pepsi's a Coke. Sprite's a Coke.
Yeah, it's what kind of Coke you want.
What kind of Coke do you want? Not, I want a Coke. It's like, oh, yeah, I'll take a Coke. Yeah, but a Dr. Pepper. Like,
yeah. And it's so weird. Funny because, like, Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew, probably some other ones were all invented in the South. Dr. Pepper was invented in Texas. Coca-Cola was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Pepsi was in North Carolina. Mountain Dew is in Tennessee.
We like our Cokes.
We do. We like our fizzy
cola
sugar
products.
drinks. Our cola products.
Cola products.
Soft
that hurts
drinks.
to say. Ugh, it's a Coke.
Cola. I always say it weird. Like, even when I say Coca-Cola, I feel like I say it weird. Coke. Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Pepsi-Cola.
Pepsi-Cola.
Also, I could only think of this because when I was talking about the Cola Wars and I was researching it, that line from the Billy Joel song kept going in my head. And it made me think there's a new, super tangent. There's a new Fall Out Boy song.
It's so good.
It's updated. I have listened to it probably like 500 times.
So good.
Listeners, there's an updated version of We Didn't Start the Fire by Fall Out Boy. And it's so good. And it's for the millennial generation.
They should do that every couple decades. Just a new one.
Yeah. Like every 30 years, a new We Didn't Start the Fire.
Yeah.
It's because I love the Billy Joel one, but I don't know what most of the events are talking about. Yeah. And then I heard this one, I was like, oh crap, I know almost every single event that happened in the song, and it shook me.
This is our life. Like,
and it's so funny. I was on my way, like, I guess it'd be months ago for our listeners, when I went camping. We stopped in Kentucky, and I was in the car listening to the radio while Kyle went inside in the store, and that song came on. And I was just in the car by myself, just like wide-eyed staring out the windshield, like, and like singing along to it, but like hearing like the new lyrics, I was like, oh my God, this is my life. God, give it a listen. It's really good.
I don't feel like, this is another just little tangent, that people truly understand what our, like, the millennial generation went through. Every generation I know has issues, but my God, we started out with like 9/11 as children, and it's just been downhill since.
Yeah, it has not improved. There was a little high point with Pokemon Go in 2016, and then it really went from there.
Yeah, we had a little bump back up, but that was about it. I mean, we went from 9/11 to watching our parents lose their jobs and lose their houses in 2008, and then woo.
Yeah, has not improved. No. And now we're adults, and we're like, what do we do?
I
what's
guess
happening? What's going on?
Drink overpriced coffee and eat avocado toast. It's apparently what everyone else thinks we do.
Listen, don't knock avocado toast. I love me.
I would never. I love me some avocado toast.
With a fried egg on top and some pepper.
And I love
a little hot sauce.
Some overpriced coffee. Yes. I'm a bougie coffee bitch.
Listen, this woman has her own, was it like a foamer, a coffee foamer?
It's a milk frother, but it also heats up the foam while it's doing it. So if I have hot coffee, I make hot foam, and if I have cold coffee, I make cold foam, and I take that bitch camping. I was sleeping in a tent one night, and I woke up, and I made frothed creamer for my coffee because I'm bougie and I have standards. Okay?
It's so nice because
we had an extension cord.
There you go. It's so nice because now when I go over, even her children will be like, Aunt Momo needs a fancy coffee. And I'm like, it's not done without the fancy coffee. Her husband will offer me the frothed coffee. Like, it's so nice. Yeah. I feel so fancy.
We fresh grind the beans every morning. And to keep from waking up the kids, I hold it against my body. Because I wake up at 5:30.
It's so super loud.
Press it against me. It is super loud. But it does a good job. And my coffee pot can make iced coffee or hot coffee. Single cup, half a cup. I need an espresso machine.
You do not need espresso. I know what you were like when you were on espresso. Drinking 6 espressos a day.
It was 9. In one shift. Thanks, Panera. Mm-hmm. Appreciate that. And look, I was a manager. I got it for free.
Yeah,
and I was tired.
Because
I was going to college full time and working full time. And then I got pregnant and had to detox immediately.
Quit cold turkey.
I literally was having cold sweats and the shakes and my vision was blurry. I was going through withdrawals at work.
Straight up withdrawals.
So bad. So new. So don't get addicted to caffeine, much like those Coke drinkers.
Goodness gracious.
I know, I'm telling you, I got a caffeine problem. I have to cut myself off. I can't drink caffeine after noon now.
If I drink it after like 1 in the afternoon, makes me really sleepy. And I get really grouchy.
Makes you sleepy?
Yeah, it does. In the morning, it wakes me up. In the afternoon, it makes me sleepy.
Oh.
It's really weird. I don't understand.
See, that's interesting. Bodies are weird. I just end up staying up and staring at the ceiling all night. And then I had to take a melatonin gummy. And then I get like weird caffeine, half melatonin dreams. It's, well, I'm a delicate flower now.
Welcome to just our regular conversations. Like, we'll just talk about stuff like this for hours.
There's a reason when we're together, we don't go to sleep till 3 a.m.
We don't. We're like, you're one of my best friends in the entire world. I love being with you, but I get so tired whenever I come visit because we don't stop talking for like 72 hours.
Yeah, and we laugh so much that our faces hurt. And it's like, Morgan, I love you. You're going to have to leave my house so I can stop smiling because I can't. It hurts.
We went last November we did like a Jeep camping trip and me and Emily were in the back seat of someone else's Jeep. One of the guys in front turned around and said, "Do you two ever shut up?"
And through our cry tears of like laughing cry tears, we were like, no.
We never stopped. And we kept talking and like 10 minutes later he was like, "Oh my God, y'all have not taken a breath."
Just leave us in the woods. We'll talk on the way back.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. It's fine.
Just leave us a flashlight. We'll be all right.
It's fine. All right. Anyway, you can find us on Instagram at illequippedhistory. We have the Facebook group Ill-Equipped History Podcast group on Facebook. I can't remember if I said that right. My brain is starting to collapse. Email us at illequippedhistory@gmail.com. if you have any suggestions or advice or comments.
Puns, anything.
Yes, please. If you want to send us a pun or a meme or a story, feel free to do that. And if you have corrections,
Yes,
research is hard,
yes,
and if we say anything that is just not right, you can gently let us know, and we will work to correct that.
We own our mistakes, and we will definitely correct ourselves however we need to do that.
Oh God, I'm wrong so much. I'm dumb as shit, so I'm wrong a lot.
Well, I've been singing about rock and roller cola wars, so... I was thinking of a roller coaster the whole time.
Why is it called a roller coaster?
I don't know.
Is that how they said it in the 80s?
I don't know slang very well.
I'm slang for a roller coaster.
I don't know. I've been singing it like that since I was a kid because I loved Billy Joel.
Oh,
I love it.
Oh, man.
All
Okay.
right.
Oh,
We're gonna go.
We'll leave y'all here. All right. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Okay, bye.